Okay. Welcome back. We're having our Kaipara District Council briefing Wednesday, 4th September. The first item on the briefing agenda is the external presenter, Rhonda Smith, talking to us about revenue and financing policy for the annual plan. Thank you, Rhonda. Rhonda, sorry about that.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'll get there slowly.
That's a different. Last month.
Okay, thank you.
How are we all today?
Good.
That's good. Peachy. Avocado-y. I saw lots of avocados as I was driving here, so. So this is our second briefing of the rates review for the next annual plan, is the intention. So I just wanted to whip through a few slides of where we got to and then create on the modelling that we did, which is looking at the LV versus CV and the stormwater. So so this is the step 2 part of what we're looking at. So the implications of Metro, and had a look at all the activities. Now that we're looking at the overall instance of rates and where that sits.
Thank you.
We had a few questions previously. So we talked about building consents recovery and the percentages that we're sitting on at the moment. Previously, it was actually 85%, got brought down in the last conversations. And that really is around where we're sitting at the moment in the community and what sort of building consents we're getting. In the past, there were a lot of new builds, which had quite a high percentage of attracted charges. They've reduced, a lot more renovations, a lot more fireplaces, those sorts of things, and that percentage is obviously a lot smaller. And in the last couple of years, the percentages they've hit is 65, and it's looking like this year at 57. So they're quite a lot lower than they've been in the past, which are up around that 90, 85, 90%. So looking at that, I think we're around about the right space, that 70 to 80. I think if we start playing with those, we're going to be in trouble. So that's the first building consent question that we answered. Next one was around no, it's a resource consents, that's one. So resource consents had a look at the same thing, and they are running within that 65 to 75% and have been for the last few years. It's been actually increasing slightly as they go. So once again, I think we're in the right percentage for that number as well. There was a discussion around plan changes and plan change charges. They are actually gone through in another space. They don't go through district planning, but the staff charges for those hours go through that by timesheet. So all of that is actually moved out. All of the costs of that is moved out for private plan changes, and they're charged through. Sorry, and I can't remember the name of the. It's just disappeared for a second. It goes through another activity. So that's there he is. Michael, sorry. What's the name that the plan change charges go through, the activity? Future planning?
208.
Forward planning, sorry, I knew. So that's separate from district plan, so. And then pension housing. This is one that we might need to just confirm, something that's possibly been discussed at council before, but we just need to make sure. Pensioner housing traditionally in most councils is a ring-fenced activity. in the fact that the activity itself pays for itself. That's the way it's set up in the revenue and financing policy at the moment. I just wanted to make sure that council still has that expectation. That pensioner housing is completely ring fenced.
Councillor Vincent?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've not strictly speaking, questions or comments we can provide.
Yeah, I think so as we go.
In a briefing.
Have some, we would be taking the approach, if it's 100% ring fenced, that's entirely private benefit rather than public good. So I raised the question so that I'm okay with that, but I think we need to also make that a conscious choice. And so I raised the question, is there a public good element to the fact that we're providing some pensioner housing for people perhaps who are unable to have their own house? The question I put. I guess that's not, well, I'd be interested in staff comments, but also from other members.
Well,
Someone want to make a comment about that?
I mean, is that a fair question? Is that an appropriate question?
is there a public good
A public good element
element?
to the fact that the council is providing pensioner housing?
Well, I mean, if I may,
Sure.
so I would have thought that that is a fundamental element towards the provision of that. You know, I don't know whether I'm barking up a
Well,
rat's nest in saying that, but I mean, if you're going to do something like pensioner housing, there has to be an element of public good.
okay, well, if I can just respond to that, try and provoke some more reactions. If it's a public good, then should the general ratepayer be contributing to it? And I can also take the view, so I'm quite comfortable with it, say, well, the government has obviously set the agenda. They don't enable us to pick up the subsidy available for pensioner housing from which private community trusts can. Their strategic direction is for local government to get out of pensioner housing. And if that is the case, why are we going to make ourselves martyrs by having general ratepayers contribute? So I'm just want to canvass the approach and see what others think, because I think it is, if we see that there is an element of public good, as we have done with the sewerage rate, then there's an argument which says that the general ratepayer should be contributing to them. And we've always held to it being in effect entirely private benefit. So I just want to hear from what others think.
Councillor Larson?
Well, I think that the approach that we've taken is that we wanted to continue to look after our existing tenants for the rest of their lives and do that in a good way. And I still feel that we should continue to do that. I don't know whether I'm talking about subject to.
No, well, so do you see that there is a public good element to doing that, our existing approach?
Well, there's an element of community good to it.
Yeah, that's public good. So then should the general ratepayer be contributing?
Well, I don't think there's any way for us to do that other than the way that we're currently doing it, because I don't know how else we're going to fund that activity continuing in the meantime, other than this, unless an external agency was going to take it over, which I don't know that they are. So
Yeah, so the way that it's set up to be funded at the moment, it is ring fenced. So ultimately, the money that comes in from the rentals pays for any maintenance, any upkeep, any of those sort of bits and pieces. Without knowing what you're setting your rentals at, there is quite a common process with councils for that to be benchmarked against the superannuation payout, or it's not considered quite often market rate. And that is often then, along those points of view, deemed to be the it's being offered at a reduced rate. So at the moment, that is the way that the policy is set, is that it is ring fenced. At the moment, my understanding is that there have been the odd dips into general rates. That's not available within the revenue and financing policy as it stands at the moment. The question comes back to, so what would normally happen is anything that you set from a rental, any benefit that you make in a year is put aside for putting, into a specific ratepayers, not ratepayers, a pensioner housing reserve, and that reserve then is used to top up in future when they need to do any amount of maintenance.
Okay, councillor Nair.
I just have a question on whether, in comparison to other councils across New Zealand, pensioner housing, is it the key objective of every council? Because I've noticed that quite a few of them just give it away to different community trust bodies who manage it. Then the general rates, we don't have to worry about that because they come with whatever problem. Is it the model based on your experience you prefer, or?
It's changing across councils. I suppose there's been a tradition of councils actually having some form of pensioner housing. There are those that have said that they'll stick with the level that they've got and not build any more. There are other councils out there who are in that process of building more pensioner housing. Hastings District Council is about to do that. They are doing that in conjunction with one of the local iwis as well. So it's a partnership. It's not just the council doing it by themselves, which tends to be where you're going if you're going with that in the future. But it is very common to have them ring fenced and for there not to be any general rates included in it.
Thank you.
Councillor Howard, followed by councillor Paniora.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brian, it's an interesting scenario, and I don't know when we as Kaipara started to provide pensioner housing, but certainly, as Councillor Larson said, that we made an agreement earlier on their tenure to look after the pensioners that were in the existing facilities. However, there is the bigger picture of the government, the sphere of government, and their responsibilities. And I'm reminded of the words of the current national MP for Northland, who quite emphatically said council should not spend any money on welfare, that sort of area. I guess the evolution is pensioner housing rolling over into the whole MSD, the welfare environment. And it is probably a question to be raised at some stage with government and maybe through our local member, that what is the boundary? Because, as you say, we are not getting subsidy. So what we're doing, going back to Councillor Vincent's original question, is we are continuing the public good at the moment, at least. But I think that there is a question. We are excluded from subsidies and things like that, whereas professional operators, commercial operators in that sphere get this. So maybe the government is actually saying that we should get out of it. But if that's the case, I'd certainly be emphatic about the proper and controlled transition. But I mean, maybe we're going to leave on the table that we have to have a discussion with government about what the process is, because that's the avenue, that's the pathway of discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Paniora.
Yeah, thank you. They say that the measure of a society is based on how it treats its elderly. And I think that there's definitely testament to that, particularly in, Te Ao Māori and Māori culture. Our elderly are very, very important. You look at Whangarei District Council, I think it has about 160 pensioner units. Same with Far North District Council, it has about 140 pensioner units. That combined with our ageing population in this district being, you know, the getaway for, I guess, retirees cashing out of Auckland, there's definitely going to be a greater need for it. I can, you know, speaking for the West and for Dargaville, we hardly have any housing providers who cater to elderly, and we only have, you know, one retirement village here. Compare that with, you know, Whangarei, the Far North, Auckland, there's a number and range of different retirement villages. So I think that until such time as we have others that are able to help our elderly, that we still need to continue with that. However, I also see the ability or opportunity for the council to actually continue in the housing sector and do it really well and efficiently. Are we as efficient as we should be? That's probably the question. If we are having to dip into the rates take, with the few units that we do have, we probably aren't as efficient as we possibly could be. If we were to have a look at another model where we continue to purchase land or reallocate land for housing, and then have you know, pensioner housing and some types of social housing, so that we can contribute from other sorts of housing models that we have into the pensioner housing, then I think that's probably the way forward. I think that we should have more housing as opposed to less housing. You take the Far North District Council, for example, it's managed to bring its rates take down because it has social housing on the books now. Far North District Council, or should I say Far North Holdings, is a 50% investor in the 4th Ave or Huiro Street development, 2 streets over from me. And that has developments like that have allowed them to reduce the rates take. So I think that we should provide more housing stock as opposed to less housing stock in order to continue to meet the needs of our elderly members of the district, as well as being able to bring the burden down on the ratepayer. I think that through the Future of Local Government report and through other policies that this government's looking at, that housing is the way to go for councils, and that we should be doing more, not less, in that space. Yeah, those are just some of my comments around that.
Thank you. Okay, carry on.
So aside from the fact that whether you should be in or out, at the moment you're in, so it's around ensuring that if we're saying that the policy is that it sticks at the moment, that it's pensioner housing, is ring fenced, that it stays, that's where the dollars stay, and that general rates aren't used. That has, as long as we're in that space and we're okay with that with the revenue and financing policy, then we just need to make sure that that's the way that the pensioner housing is being delivered.
See, particularly when we a council that has to be lean and mean, if we can, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So those are the questions that were sort of outstanding from the previous presentation. So I just wanted to get it now into really where we're at with doing step 2. And one of the first things we wanted to do was just remind everyone of so what we wanted to do was just really make sure that everyone knew what was in the general rate and what wasn't. And so the general rate at the moment is these activities as they stand. Remembering that last time parks and libraries are now in a targeted uniform rate, that was taken out as part of the LTP. So general rates sits in this space. This is what we've modelled versus LV versus CV. So we haven't touched any of the basis for any of the other rates. The rates that we've modelled at the moment is LV CV for the general rate. So this is what this is involved. Questions on that bit?
Mr. Nair?
Thank you, Chair. So step 2 workshop, that's the one, right? If you look at what's in the general rates, you mentioned a lot of items which are like wastewater, you mentioned 5%. But you know, the 95% or whatever it is equalized over the district.
That's right.
So essentially it's all general rates.
No, it's general rates it's a targeted rate to the, and that's normally based on a rating unit or a PAN, separately used and inhabited part. And that's to the people that are connected. So it's not to everyone across the district, it's only to those that are connected.
So it's just the wastewater per se, it's not the wastewater and the services and everything.
Yeah, so the wastewater services get added together. 5% of it is put into the general rate, with the idea that normally that's done because you say there is a benefit to the wider community of having a good wastewater system within the district. You know, there's a wider benefit, so 5% has been put in general. The 95% is charged to those people who are connected based on separately used or inhabited parts. So every household basically has a charge.
That's equalized over the district. Is it
Correct.
norm in most councils? Okay.
Yeah, that's quite common. What you tend to find, especially in rural councils, is, and we're talking about that with stormwater at the moment, is that a smaller area, when that gets upgraded, its rates go through the roof, and then it slowly comes down, and you do another wastewater system over here. We've not quite often got more than 1 or 2 wastewater systems. Quite often it's 6 or 7. And equalising it across the district means that the rates stay relatively similar across the district. It's not if someone moves, their rates don't go through the roof.
I could comment there. I await the howls of anguish and anger coming from Mangawhai at having to contribute to the cost of upgrading Dargaville's sewage system as is coming, okay? Apart from the grant from the government to improve the bunding around, but when we actually have to find a permanent solution, which is not so close to the river, there will be lots of money required, and it will come from across the district of people connected to a sewage scheme run by the council.
It's the payback time.
And, okay, anyone else like to make a comment or carry on? Thank you.
Rio.
We just need to replay the howls of anguish from the people at Dargaville contributing to.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Just on this, to our previous subject, where does the cost of elected members come in? Is that just under elections, or is that the specifics of?
Governance. Under civil defence.
No. Okay.
So everyone pays for you.
Yeah.
And fair enough too.
Yep.
So part of the question of council was, we wanted to have a look at the LV versus CV on general rate. So that's using land value, which is what you're doing at the moment, versus using capital value. Capital value is quite common. And the fact that it changes it from purely a land tax to more of a wealth tax. And the fact that you are taking into account the full value of the property rather than just the land value. So it's including all of its improvements. When you normally do an LV to CV move, it moves it out of the rural sectors and brings it into town, both across residential and also commercial, because that's, as you can imagine, the LV in town is smaller because it's a smaller piece of property, but the house on it adds the value. So And I've done some modelling on this, so we'll go through the details in a minute, and I can bring the spreadsheets up because they're interactive and we can have a look at how that flows. But that's proven in the modelling that we've done, that the residential increases as the CV attracts more rates. And that's less if we leave the differentials on, because at the moment the differentials are quite pushed. Rural's reduces as the CV moves, and once again, this is less if the differentials are left on. Commercial increases, and that's heightened if we leave the differentials on, because the differentials almost look like they were put in place to try and simulate what a CV was doing versus an LV. So I've done 2 lots of modelling with the differentials on and the differentials off. I think there's still a conversation that we need to have about differentials in their own right, but from looking at the information at the way that it sits at the moment, I think we need to have a review of those differentials and look at a better way of doing it. Leaving them on is a bit of a double whammy.
Yeah.
So this is the overall change, and you can see it's mainly in that middle area. There's not a lot that sort of float to some really big numbers. The bigger numbers I'll come to in a minute. I've got some information on some of those outliers and where they sit. And then I looked at that based on residential split. So as you can see, the residential has definitely got a higher proportion of people above, when we take the differentials off, which is what you would expect, because you're bringing the rates into town. And you can see there, once again, the rural rates with differentials and no differentials.
Clarification, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you say differential, can you just explain what exactly you count?
So at the moment, there's a differential, can you remind me what it's on?
It's on
Commercial and rural, commercial and residential.
it's on lifestyle, anything over 2 hectares, lifestyle and commercial. A residential and then other, anything that's residential under 2 hectares or anything that's over.
Yeah.
It's got the differentials 155.
Yeah, so what happens is, instead of getting, like, for every $1 of rate that's required, the differential changes that. So it's 1.55, also 155 versus 100. So it pushes more rates into those areas with the differentials in that space.
So who decides to differentiate that?
Council does.
It comes to the council.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But at the moment, if we left those differentials on with going to CV, it's creating a really large adjustment to those commercial rates.
Distorting a huge, Councillor Vincent?
Yeah, can I just get clarification of the graph, because I struggle just to understand how it works. It's basic bell graph. What the first row at the bottom is that a reference to property values, or like you've got a minus, then you get to the 0 and then you go to the plus?
Yeah, so that's change in dollars and rates. So it's dollar changes in their rates compared to what they would have paid last year if we change it to CV.
Right.
So that's if you look at this, the split on the side and the other side, on the right-hand side, there's you can see where it's got.
That's the same as what's underneath, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are 3 people that have a reduction in their rates in rural between 15,000 and 90,000 by going to this differential, by making these changes.
Okay.
Now, some of those, and I've done dollars for a reason. Percentages push, you can get, percentages don't really give you the full picture. What we're trying to show you is actual dollars of changes. And then underneath that there is the changes with the differential numbers and then the no differentials. So how many are in that gap?
Right, and on the left-hand vertical axis, you've got the number of assessments that are affected.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. So just to read it, then I'll go back to the peak.
Mhm.
what I'm seeing is that it'd be, the greatest, where there's no differential applied, so it's the blue line, got, a change of $200,
Are you on,
thousand.
are you on the rural one or the the one before? First,
I'm just trying to get a handle on how to interpret.
208.
So is that, so
I can't quite see that on the screen, so I'm just trying to pull my number up.
let's go to the next one anyway.
Yeah, no, that's all right. It's easier.
That one there. Yeah.
Yep. So yes, there's, if we're looking at that, the biggest number,
Yep.
which is 4,700. If,
Of, rateable assessments.
yes,
Yep.
they have, with no differentials, they have a difference between $0 and $200.
Right, and whereas you apply the differential, then the number of properties affected comes down to just over 3,500.
Yes,
Right.
that's correct.
3,634.
Oh, that's applied on over here. Yep.
Councillor Manderson, you had a question?
Thank you, Your Honour. Can I ask, without you necessarily giving the name, are you aware of a party that would do these developments?
So,
As compared with just facilitating the potential to do the development, have you a name? I'm not asking you to declare it. Have you a named entity that's prepared to do the development?
Not talking about developments, Ron, we're talking about the difference in CV versus a land value rating, how it affects the district's property owners. We can, 600. If you introduce a CV to a district, like everyone kind of accepts, we've been through this discussion before, that everyone kind of accepts that there's no such thing as a completely fair system. 360. I think when we first discussed this, the general feeling was that the C system was more likely to impact on, without using it the wrong word, the wealthy. But also, so if you've got a house that's a lesser house than the one next door, but your land values used to be the same, one could go up because they got a really fancy house and the other one could go down. Is that correct?
There's a possibility of that.
So it'll directly, once again, go back to what QV assess your property to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and which it does with land value as well, because QV are doing both the land value and the capital value
Yeah.
valuations. So what it does is it takes the value of the overall property, not just the land value, and applies the rating process to that.
So this is more likely to capture a business that's like a $20 million business on a piece of land that's valued no more than a 500,000.
Yeah.
like the,
That's
the
correct.
factory.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So when you look at the outliers, which we've got, which are the ones that are, you know, outside of what I'd call a sort of normal gap within the middle, where it's a bit of a movement and a bit of a swing either way. You know, the really big players, or the really big people that pay a lot more, are those commercial properties that have substantial capital value on top of the land that they're sitting on, compared to, and you know, if you look at it as maybe a small farm in comparison to a smaller farm who has the same value of land or size of land, but there's no improvements on it. So that's the analogy. So there's, and the bit probably, which is why I said it's taking it from a land tax to a wealth tax, and the value of what that, especially in the commercial space, the value of what the potential income is from that land includes the capital value as well.
Does it?
Yes,
Okay.
because it takes into account the improvement.
So if you've got a $20 million house that's Mangawai or Bailey's looking at the water and you've got a fibrite batch next door, that's going to make quite a big difference with CV. Person with the really flash house gets whacked. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't use the word whack. They get an increase.
Yes, they get under CV, they would have a high proportion of a rate value. Sorry, you can see I've done this before.
Yeah.
The high proportion of the rate value because of the value of the capital value of that property versus next door, which might have a lower capital value.
Right. Erin?
Thank you. Three things. So just going on from that though, also if you had if you look at the other side of the coin and you've got a property, that is not valued as much and the people in there struggle to meet their rates, they're possibly looking at a decrease in their rates because it's just a different way to carve the same
Yes.
pie. My questions were, what happens with bare land?
So bare land is based on the capital value. So it would be, because there's no improvements, it basically is the land value. So because there's no improvement to add on top of it, so bare land would be the same.
The same as it is.
They would be the same. So what would normally happen in that space, which you can see in some of it, is that the residential value of bare land would attract less under CV than it would under LV because there is no improvements on that land.
Right, okay.
Yep.
And then the other question I had, I've forgotten, what was the other question? Ray?
You can come back. Councillor Howard, followed by Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Rhonda, if I've got two farms sitting side by side
Yes.
and one, that roughly equal value, right, size. One has magnificent home on it and the other has not a magnificent home. But that second farm has invested an awful lot of money in developing their land, their grasses, their paddocks, their pastures, with irrigation or things. They've just done a lot more with that land. How are they handled? Are they only managed through this CV basis of the increased value of property A with the magnificent house? Is there anything taken into account with all the work that's done to improve the land?
Sorry, and that's getting into a valuation question, which is probably something I'm definitely not an expert at. That would be something that we'd have to bring QV in to answer how they would value the two differently.
Yep.
And if you're looking at that completely as they were exactly the same sort of land and there was a house on it and that had $200,000 worth of value more than the other, then it would be,
Yep.
The valuation of the land would be, that's a valuation question rather than, rather than a split of how the rates are separated. But that'd be a good question to ask QV is how they would look at
How they manage it.
the process.
Councillor Anderson?
Thank you, Your Honour.
Sorry. Before I did have
Let,
Councillor Wilson, Councillor Vincent,
Can we just let,
Anderson.
Say something in regard to that, is that improvements isn't just a house, it might be fencing, it might be pump stations, it would be all of that stuff, barns,
Yeah.
not just.
If you like, that farm B in this instance has a much better revenue stream because of.
That's likely to not count.
Cool.
Okay, now we have Councillor Erin Wilson-Collins, Councillor Vincent, followed by Councillor Manderson. Okay.
Thank you for
Naya.
being old fast. Split, that was what I was gonna ask about. If we wanted to go down, capital value, do we have to treat every property type the same? Because I know there's, for example, under commercial, there's concepts about small businesses and the impact it might have on their rates versus big commercial, industrial. But then there's also some concern about residential, you have people who have built their wealth up, but all their wealth is in their house. They don't actually have income to pay an increased rate. Like, is there a way of actually having a hybrid model?
unfortunately, the very short answer to that is no, there's not. Rates are a pretty blunt tool. You have very little way that we can split how you rate in that space.
Okay.
And it's really only under the Rating Act based on what types of ways that we can do it. You can have some remission policies, which you probably do have with things like hardships. So if someone's got a real hardship process that they can come in and put to you, there is other opportunities to do things like rates rebates. But you can't go through and say, you know, this is a commercial business, and it's only a mum and pop, therefore we're only going to give them 1.5% of a, you know, versus a large commercial, which you might get.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really blunt tool.
Yeah, it's just good to get that clarified because I just noticed someone who would have probably asked that question.
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If, firstly, I would dispute your comment about it becoming more like a wealth tax, because to me, the biggest factor, it's still a blunt tool, and I regard it as still another form of property tax, which takes no account of the level of indebtedness carried on individual property. And so while someone might have a really expensive new house, it could be that it's 90% owned by the bank. And so it doesn't give an indication of someone's ability to pay a larger chunk of rates. I'll just make that point. The other thing I wanted to say is to help Councillor Manderson out, I think where he might have been heading is that the question is more likely for someone who's got bare land and looking at its development potential, to what extent would capital value rating be a disincentive to that development taking place?
We have yet to find in all the councils that I've worked with, the rating level to be a disincentive for people to want to develop land. It tends to be outside factors such as the cost of construction, you know, the market, the cost of finance, the market, you know, whether it's a bear market and you can sell anything for, you know, drop of a hat, or if it's a buyer's market, those tend to be what would make a difference to whether someone would do a development or not. Doesn't tend to be whether it's a capital value or land value rate.
So I've got enough money together to build my new house on this bare block of land, which I also just managed to pay for. Mortgage up to the hilt, and the rates on the property after I've built my new house are going to double. Is that the scenario potentially?
Without sitting down and actually doing what the numbers would be.
I'm still only going to be the same unit land in charge.
Yes, yeah.
But I mean, that's a possible scenario, isn't it?
That is a possible scenario.
Yep.
So
Okay.
that's the point of.
Whereas someone, I was just thinking through doing a subdivision, bare land, selling bits of bare land, doing the subdivision will increase the land value, will also increase the capital value, but that's probably no change, yeah? Only when you start putting improvements on the land.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Councillor Manderson.
Can I add to that, or when land is sold?
Yeah. Councillor Naya, followed by Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if I look at this picture in general, it looks like, and correct me if I'm wrong, by choosing capital value, the rural sector benefits largely, but the residential, if you look at the next one, is not affected. It's just the amount of properties we hold, the residential versus rural, is so much that the aftermath of that benefit to the rural property is offset by only $200 increases to the residential one, and commercial, industrial, CV changes and all, apart from a few industries which bear the brunt of 50,000 or 60,000. So it's a good tool. I counter Councillor Vincent's question in terms of somebody having a large mortgage and he has to pay whether he can afford it. Well, if he can't afford it, he should not have bought a big house if he can afford $1 million house, he should afford to pay more. So all I'm trying to say, it looks like a fair reproduction, if I can rely on what figures you see, to say it is beneficial to move because the CV takes care of the land value. Anyway, thank you.
Just before I,
Right? Sorry, that's the question.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, it definitely, it has more of a tendency in CV to take it out of the rural property.
Yeah.
And move it into commercial and residential.
Thank you.
just before I go to councillor Williams' question, these figures are all taken from the recent QV.
Yes.
Right, thank you, councillor Williams.
Thank you. I don't know if it's a silly question or not, but for each of the sectors, commercial, community, industrial, lifestyle, and as it goes down, are there separate differentials for each of those sectors, or is it just the two?
Just the two, yeah.
Could other differentials be applied to the sectors to kind of even things out, or?
We can look at, it really comes back to what you're allowed to attach a rating differential to as part of the land, as part of the rating schedules. That I'd need to investigate a little bit more. What you tend not to do is get down to the stage that you've got differentials across the board, yeah. But in saying that, it's common to have a differential around commercial, rural, and residential tends to be one, because that's the biggest, and then you differentiate the others. So that, yeah, that's tending to be where it's at.
Okay.
Councillor Larson, followed by councillor Howard.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah. Could you just recap for us, please, the number of councils that are using CV versus energy now?
Sorry, I can't.
That's approximately.
I don't have that number. I'm sorry. The majority, as I understand it, are still on CV. There are some that have a CV for most of the rating, and then they use other values. I mean, wastewater and water, it's different anyway, but some tend to look still at land value for roading. There's a bit of a mix in that space.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I mean, I'd quite like to see us move on without going around forever and ever, but my comments are really that I think that this works really good. And what I've observed is similar to what the councillor Naya has referred to. There aren't a whole lot of outliers out in the two standard deviations space. And it's quite well compartmentalised. The ups and downs are spread, but they're not huge. Take the differentials out, it reduces that down to be more moderate. And, you know, you're looking at maybe changes of $3 or $4 a week on majority of the changes, vast majority. And ultimately, I think our intention was to go out and consult on this with the community fully through the annual plan. And from what I can see here, let's see what our community think about the proposal. That's where I am at this moment. Thank you.
Councillor Howard.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. With councillor Larson about moving on, but I just had this query in the back of my head about these differentials, and maybe I'm just totally forgetting how they're structured and or why. And in fact, is there another way of using differential that could have a beneficial effect across the board? So I guess the first question is, are we able to briefly, or we can do it offline, just talk about why the differential is set? Because I'm forgetting that if we've been told. And so then from there, are there other vaccinations that we could look at with a differential that would have a beneficial outcome?
Yep, sure. So the principle behind differentials, is really to So the example that I'll use is another council that I've done some work for. They've got a differential of 1 for residential, 0.9 for rural, and 1.8 for commercial. And they've done that because of the perception of who uses in that general rate most of the services that come out of that general rate gap. And so rural, primarily because it's out of town, there's, less access to any of that information, any of that work. That's where they've tended to put a 0.9 on it. So it's not purely residential, but it's a little bit less.
So this is, if we're working on, let's say, $1,000 value, so the rural is valued at 900.
So in the rating dollar, so it's not so much the valuation, but the amount of rating that it would attract.
So
It's-
area would.
Yeah, so for every dollar, they pay 90 cents versus
Yep.
a dollar that residential would pay.
Yep.
And $1.80 that would be being paid by commercial.
So I guess to my point is that it's a relatively arbitrary tool that we have, is just approximations.
So it's a tool that councils can use to adjust where they feel the benefit lies.
Yeah.
That's the tool we needed instead of the parks and libraries targeted rate.
Councillor Larson.
Much better.
Well, it's a tool that we currently have, is using differentials, and I think this probably seems like there's still a little bit of the lack of clarity around the table about exactly what we do currently do. And if you want to find it, it's in our revenue and financing policy in our recently adopted long-term plan on pages
Right, you've got the mix.
229 and 30, I think.
So could you just read them out for me? Because my
Oh,
computer
yeah,
just died.
it's just basically, we've got the two differentials. 100% is for residential and the small lifestyle, which is under 2 hectares. The other one is other, which is everybody else, and all of the other categories, which is 155%.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that, 100% and 155%.
Which is what the staff told us already this morning, but yeah, we could have used that, we could have played around with that instead of doesn't matter, to achieve what we were trying to achieve. I think we would have gotten a better way. So it's really,
Manderson.
Yeah,
Thank you, Your Honour. I would add that from the investor's point of view, they need to see that the council or a major body is behind it. Otherwise, you're asking them to invest in a no-go area, which is basically north of the bridge and left of the highway is a no-go area. And you must overcome that. And you only overcome that with that added credibility.
Okay, carry on, Bronda.
so really so this is as we said before, 91% have changed from, I'm looking at stormwater there. So really from this point of view, if we're saying, yes, we would like to look at CVs with no differentials, but maybe what would we do in a differential space if we were going to? For the next, or are we looking at no differentials at all?
The investor will look past that and will be concerned with saleability.
Councillor Larson.
Thank you, Your Worship. If we can make it simple and not have differentials, great. But if we have a category in there, for example, commercial, that's not reasonably okay, maybe we do need to tweak it with a differential, see how the numbers come out.
Yeah.
So when I don't want to see, I think there's been concern around the table that small commercial can be affected. I don't think the numbers show that they are that bad. But if we did need to tweak it to make it more palatable, then maybe we could. see how the numbers rolled out.
Okay.
Is that an okay approach?
Yeah, so I think probably what we'll do is if we go from where we are now with the no differentials and have a look at how that pans out in its entirety. Then we can go from there and have a look with what differentials might be a possibility to have a look at that.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. The other question that was asked was around stormwater and equalisation with stormwater. So I've done that work as well. And this is looking at leaving stormwater on land value. And that if we moved that to equalised across all of the sectors, there's very little change. Other than Mangawhai being the most affected, with 99.4% of them going from $0 to $400 increase in their rates, taking it out to be equalised. What that does is it just means, once again, it's a little bit like the equalisation with any of the wastewater and water. We didn't do stormwater at the same time. Now's the opportunity to do that, and it means that if we've done a big pot of work in Mangawhai, that's paid for by the community across the board, not just the Mangawhai residents. It is already equalised for operational, it's only capital at the moment that's not.
Thank you.
Councillor Vincent.
Yeah, just with a view to us going out to the public on this issue. See, that's a bit like something from the bank telling you there's been a change in your interest rate. What we want to know, has it increased or has it decreased? So when we're communicating the message, can we be quite explicit about saying that this would mean an increase in rate from $0 to $400 as opposed to just saying a change? Just let's be really open about it, eh?
Yep.
More of a comms question than.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, I mean, it makes sense to look at stormwater, as you say, while we're looking at both waters. But my question is more to do with the three waters being out and the new plans, whichever. Will we still have the flexibility of imposing what we are deciding today in that scenario as well? Because there might be a different body who decides the rates.
So this is purely looking at if water stayed within council.
Well, that's not the case, you know that.
Yeah, so the question from there is ultimately, is this something that council wants to do for 25, 26? Or is there an appetite to leave it as it is and know that it's whether stormwater is definitely going or not? And then this would be the new entities area anyway.
Good, thank you.
Councillor Larson.
Oh, thank you, Worship. Yeah. Is there anything showing us more detail around that 99.4% being between $0 and $400? Is median increase or anything, or is there a chart that's showing it that on?
The next chart.
Is the next chart?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a lot of them at Z. Okay, so we've got. Oh, yeah, most of them are $100 or $200.
Yes. Yeah.
We're talking about.
It's when we.
About sort of $2 to $4 a week on average for the vast majority of them.
So really it comes back to this is the Mangawhai result.
Yeah.
Pretty much every other area goes down.
Yeah, but for Mangawhai, even there, that's a very small change to bring everything under equalisation across the whole district. I guess carry on and moving on, my comment would be, once again, let's consult on it, see what feedback we get.
Clearly.
It's not, yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Vincent.
Clarity, are we talking about stormwater district wide or stormwater network systems that the council maintains, like in the various townships around the place? So we're not including, I guess, road runoff, for instance.
No, so Nutley Road runoff is run as, that stormwater is part of the roading network.
Subsidised.
Yeah, so that's outside of this. This is the stormwater network that's provided.
So very much parallel to sewage kind of thing in terms of
Yes.
you're in a drainage district. So they define as drainage districts. I'm trying to recall.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Cool. So that makes it quite explicit because, that's perhaps another message that needs to be made clear in the process of putting it to the people. So whether they're affected or not.
Councillor Manderson, followed by Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I suggest you should consider that people overseas only buy from or through somebody they know and trust. So unless you've got somebody that has those connections, you're wasting your breath.
Okay, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. So does this take into account the stormwater that there's 10% that's in the general rate? That's,
This is the bit that's left out.
okay,
So this is the targeted rate portion. Yeah, so purely the targeted rate stormwater. That.
Okay, carry on.
So that question is then, this would be something we would want to take out as part of our consultation if we're doing that on.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, rightio.
Good.
And so then if we don't, I don't actually think I need to bring up the other bits because we've sort of talked about what they look like. Gone through that pretty quickly. The bit that I would probably,
Oh, sorry. Ron, did you have a question?
Oh, sorry, thank you. I suggest that the council needs to cooperate, integrate with the other councils and get somebody full-time representing them with selected, well-researched investment opportunities, possessing the credibility that it gives near instant accessibility to relevant parties. And slowly you will develop a number of possibilities and you may land one or more.
We suggest, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor.
was applied to this discussion, I would raise a point of order as to relevance.
Oh, we're not doing that. This is a briefing. Councillor Larson?
So I think we've almost got to the end of this.
Yeah.
Have we? I just would mind suggesting that you just had a 5-minute adjournment at the end of this item. Would that be okay?
We're going to have lunch at the end of the side.
Are we? Okay.
Yeah.
so then I'll just, the next briefing, what we'll do is if I bring along some, so we're pretty much all there that we're going to talk about the CV, looking at the differentials and what they might do in that space. I just wanted to, did anyone want to know if, because we talked about those outliers, the ones that are at either end. So the ones that pay quite a bit more, heavy industrial manufacturing, which very large manufacturing business that we've got in the area. Commercial retail of a supermarket nature. Industrial heavy manufacturing of a meat processing nature. Commercial retail, once again, they're all pretty much well in that commercial retail, big box, manufacturing type spaces, which are the ones that are paying the most, no differential when we take the differential off.
Thank you. Wrap this up.
sorry, just one more question.
One more question? Okay.
This is to staff. I just wondered in this review, when will the development contributions review be into council? We're going to look at the effects and the way that's
Yeah,
at the moment.
that's outside my,
That's definitely on our radar, Councillor Williams. Yeah, absolutely. We actually had a discussion at ET about that during the week. We very much need to become and revamp that document and policy after the LTP.
Yeah, look, this is a This is a very important process we're going through here, and thank you, Brian, you've answered some good questions today, and we've got some more stuff coming through from you, so we can
Yeah.
keep developing our thinking on it.
Okay.
Okay, we'll have a break for lunch. We'll come back at 12:30.
On time.
survey.
All right, welcome back to reconvene this briefing, council briefing for September.
Nothing in here.
Next on our agenda, item number 2 is our annual resident survey. And I welcome Michael Hooker here from Key Research, from Michael, and Nardine Spring, Manager, Customer Services. Welcome, Nardine.
Kia ora, Mayor and councillors. So firstly, I'll take my report as read. Sorry. Yep. So joining me today, as Mayor just said, is to talk through the presentation is Michael Hooker from Key Research, who you all met around this time last year. And Key Research conducts the annual survey of Kaipara District residents for us and have been doing so for 9 years. So before Michael starts, so the objective of today's presentation is to provide yourselves with an understanding of the key findings in the 23-24 survey. We're communicating to you what our communities have told us by way of the survey. As detailed in the report, activity managers are requested to identify and implement opportunities in their areas to improve customer satisfaction. And I think a good example of that is the ongoing feedback that we had requesting improvements in the Mangawhai Library services. And as I'm sure you're all aware, the Mangawhai Library was revamped and has moved from being run by community volunteers to a Kaipara District branch library, which is now with paid staff supported by the volunteers.
Fantastic.
Yep.
If has anyone got any questions for me? I didn't receive anything come through prior. Otherwise, I'll hand it over to Michael to take you through his presentation.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Nadine, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to be here to present to you today. As introduced, my name is Michael Hooker. I'm the Director of Research at Key Research. So our session today essentially is just a walk through the executive summary from the annual residents' opinion survey, which has been recently completed. So I'll talk about the objectives of the survey firstly, and then I'll discuss the method that we used before we go on to have a look at how some of those key performance indicators have performed over the past 12 months. We'll look at what's actually driving them, the key sub-attributes which are sitting them behind them. We've got a couple of other interesting findings to talk through before we move on to the conclusion itself. I've got my assistant just hovering over my shoulder. We're good to go.
Yeah.
Here we are. So the survey sets out to assess how satisfied residents are with all of the services and facilities which are provided. We want to be able to determine any changes over time, and importantly, how metrics are performing towards long-term plan goals and objectives. But we want to be able to determine what we refer to as drivers as well, so that we can set priorities and action plans going forward to help improve residents' perceptions of the council. We've been using for the past 5 years now a method we refer to as postal to online, where we use the electoral roll as our sample frame, and this is best practice for making sure we get a really good representation of residents across the district. And so the electoral roll includes those on both the general roll and the Māori roll, and allows us to select residents from every ward, including those who would perceive to be in the Māori ward across the district as well. So this is really quite successful. You'll see there we get a really good response rate and a really good strong analytical sample to work with as well of 752 responses. We do give people the opportunity to complete the questionnaire in hard copy, but as you can see there, that number is very low and is getting lower by the year. See, interestingly there, we also have 11% completed via a proprietary email database, which we have been capturing at the back end of the questionnaire here, which is really neat because we're developing a database that we can use specifically to target people to complete surveys for us. So we're pretty good at getting a good demographic and geographic profile, but we're not perfect, and so the number is weighted afterwards to make sure it conforms with the demographic and the demographic profile and geographic distribution across the district, according to the census data. You'll see there we're collecting data across 3 waves, and that is to make sure that we account for any seasonality that may be in play. or any topical issues, that may be in play. So, moving on to the results themselves then, and we see here, it's a good news story this year. So we see a nice little uplift in terms of the overall performance metric, has increased by 6 percentage points, 50 last year up to 56 this year. And we also see across some of the other key metrics that we are presenting on the slide here, lifts in terms of perceptions as well. So that's good, but we can also see that there's still work to be done in terms of returning to some of those highs that were experienced in years gone by. We measure 58 attributes in total, and 41 of them had reported increases in terms of performance, and only 50. And so these are some of the ones which are recording the highest levels of satisfaction, really good levels of performance here, related, some of them to quality of life and others to some services and facilities which are provided by the council as well. Conversely, if we have a look at highest levels of dissatisfaction, and the two highest levels here are related to those to do with the roading network. And that's a similar sort of profile to what we received last year as well, so there's no real surprises there. What we do notice, however, is that when we conduct the driver analysis, and I'll talk a little bit about this further into the presentation, is that roading's not really popping up as a key driver of overall perceptions of performance. And we'll talk about what is at this particular point in time. That's
weird.
Can I just have a question? Are we able to see or get a supplementary table of the variances from these two tables from last time?
Yes, some of it may be presented in the slides, which I've got a couple of slides, but all of that data is actually in the report as well.
Yeah, it's always good to understand that movement. I know that you got the summaries that show the increases, but
So what you're saying though is that the no surprises, the greatest amount of dissatisfaction to do with our roading network.
Yes.
You say they are not key drivers of the people's perception of the performance of the council.
Yeah, and we will come on to discuss that, and I'll talk about our analytical model a little bit further into the presentation. So this is where the biggest levels of improvement lie, and so they revolve around standard signage on both unsealed roads and sealed roads as well. So that's good to see improvement in aspects to do with the roading network. And we also see a couple here further down the page around leadership and performance, and these are the ones that are intrinsically linked to your point there, and we'll see later on in the presentation there that they are having one overall perception of performance.
I should have asked at the beginning, what's your sort of margin of error, or like in terms of the size of the company, as to how significant these changes actually are? Like, because my suspicion is something like the standard of signage, it could just be random because you ask different people this time, sort of thing, you know.
At the highest level, that 725 responses is a really robust sample size. So we'd have a maximum sampling error at that size of around about, it would be about 3%.
Okay.
And so and we know from experience that once you're up at that level, we draw another sample, the results will be exact.
I just want to clarify from, what you mean by margin of error of say 3.4%.
Yep.
Does that mean that if it was, the change was less than 3.4%, that it would not be significant? Or does that mean that there's a 3.4% probability that the result will be different if you ask different people next time?
In terms of the significant difference, it would be if the result fell outside that sampling error, and give or take, because it depends on how many responses we've got for each issue that we're measuring. Yes, you're right. That would register as significantly different, and we identify all of those right throughout the report as well. So these results that we're looking at here would be significantly different.
Thank you. Sorry to hold you up.
No, that's fine. So then we move on to the biggest decreases here, and these are quite interesting. So generally around regulatory functions, and also around the customer experience as well. So some aspects to look at in terms of improving service in those particular areas. We'll talk about the distribution of data across the scale, what we refer to as a standard deviation, a little bit later as well. And several of these attributes that we're pointing at here have significant distributions of data. So there were those who were very dissatisfied and those who were very satisfied.
Can I ask you, I'm quite disappointed in the decreases in satisfied with building consent processes, because that's something we've worked quite hard at, I feel. Would you expect that we would get a totally different result if we went directly to the people that were seeking the building consents rather than a general out there with
People that don't know.
It's, well, firstly, and I should have pointed this out, they are small sample sizes, but they're not that small. They're around about, I think it's 46 people for building consents, and the resource consent process around about the same number, so smaller sample sizes. I did just mention that the distribution of data is quite broad, and so it means that there were people who were really satisfied, and then there were some that were really dissatisfied as well. And so that's where you get a bit of variation in the score there. So you're right, it could bounce around a little bit.
Through the chair, Alistair does do a separate survey that's targeted at building consent customers.
directly.
So we have amended the question slightly for the coming year, or the current year, sorry, where it does ask if they've actually contacted council for a building consent inquiry. And if the answer is no, we still want to get feedback from them if they've contacted us for a building related inquiry. So yeah, there is a separate, and I guess into what you said, those customers, like Alistair said, the feedback is positive.
Thank you, Nadia. That's going to be really interesting to look at separately. Yeah.
Can I just say, Mr. Mayor, I think that the survey for the building consent was reported through to the Economic Development Committee a few months ago now. And that survey is direct with users of that service, as Nadine said. And I believe, can't recall totally, but I think the response rate was excellent, but also the should call it positive feedback was in the 80s and 90%. So you're right in that we're getting a very different result from the direct customers that absolutely use that service with us compared to what's slightly coming through this month.
Right. Thank you.
Last year, I presented a number of activities which were starting to trend down over time, and we just wanted to bring that to your attention. A really pleasing thing to report this year, as you can see from the chart, is that every single one of those attributes has started to pick up as well. So some really pleasing action and activity is obviously happening, and we can see it coming through in these results, which is pleasing. So a few years ago now, we introduced our analytical model, which we refer to as our driver model, into all of the work that we do at local government level. So we're doing over 23 annual resident surveys for councils across New Zealand. And we would set down a challenge by some clients who would say to us, okay, well, these scores, are they good or they're bad? And then what should we do about them now? And we knew from all of the work that we had been doing across local government that residents found it really difficult to separate out perceptions of core service delivery from perceptions of value for money from the rates that they pay, and also from perceptions of the reputation of the council itself. So we included all of those cornerstones into our model here. And so these are all questions that appear in the questionnaire. And there's a statistical model which sits in behind this. And what we're looking to do is to determine which of these cornerstones is having the greatest level of impact upon overall performance. And it's showing us here, you'll see under the word impact is 60%. That cornerstone of image and reputation is by far the greatest level of impact on overall. And we'll see there that that image and reputation have improved. Go on to talk about this further in the next two slides. So here we have the comparison of that driver model between last year and this. And you'll note that reputation has become even more significant. So it's having an even higher level of impact on perceptions of overall performance this year. The beauty of our model is that we then step that analysis down into what we refer to as the sub attributes or the sub drivers. And this is where we start to build the story, because understand what's driving overall perceptions of performance and what we can do to start to work on those and hopefully improve them. And you'll see there, reputation, the key driver remains performance of elected members. Look what actually contributes to image and reputation. Each of these attributes that are appearing here appear as questions within the questionnaire. And you'll see faith and trust there. I just wanted to read out the wording here as it appears in the questionnaire, just to give a little bit of context for faith and trust. And it says, thinking about how open and transparent council is, how council can be relied on to act honestly and fairly, and their ability to work in the best interest of the district. Overall, how would you rate faith and trust you have in them? So that's a question there for faith and trust, which appears, a number of these have been paraphrased as it were, but you can see the level of impact. And so we start to build the story. So we come down, image and reputation, by far the greatest level of impact. What within that is having the greatest level of impact? And we see the performance of elected members there. So it starts to build the story in terms of what's driving overall performance and what we can start to work on going forward. There were a couple of cautionary tales from the analysis which we picked up on. This is what we refer to as the polarisation effect. And this is really quite fascinating. And we see this across almost every attribute that we measure for Kaipara. It's also a little bit unique to Kaipara as well. And what it's showing us is that if we look at the chart that sits on the top half of the slide there, this is the distribution scale of responses to the question regarding the performance of the elected members. And you'll see 31% sit in the 1 to 3 range and 23% sit in the 8 to 10 range. And so even though we've seen that improvement, a slight improvement in terms of overall performance of the elected members, we're seeing that quite significant polarisation effect. We've added in there in the second half of the slide the chart distribution of responses for management of water in the district. And again, we see the same thing starting to appear. Big numbers low end of the scale and big numbers at the high end of the scale as well. And that's all measured through the standard deviations that we run for each of the attributes. And so the point here is that we can look at this at the way that the council is tracking in terms of its performance, and we can say, well, this is good. We seem to be doing a pretty good job here. But we can look at the data like this and we can say we're literally almost leaving half of the community behind because they are way down the other end of the scale. So these are just interesting findings for us to be concerned on. The second cautionary tale here around what we refer to as the period effect. So you'll notice as top of this presentation there, I mentioned that we collect data at 3 points throughout the year. We're referring to them as waves here. And you'll notice how the data is trending really nicely. And then in wave 3, it's crashed for almost every one of these key metrics that we're measuring here. Now, the last 12 months, we didn't see this effect. And the council went on to record a better overall performance rating. The period before that, we did see this effect, and the council went on to record a lower performance rating than it had over the previous year. So it's just something to, again, be aware of. Downward trends can be a little bit hard to arrest.
Michael, if I can just interrupt you there. I think we've got a question. Is it from Councillor Paniora? It's got her hand up. No. Okay, carry on.
So this is the general comment section where we give residents the opportunity to provide some verbatim feedback. We analyse that and we see that the greatest collection point for comments revolves around roading and things to do with roading. So that's not altogether surprising. We often find that and sometimes it's a bit of a default collection point comments.
Sorry, I had technical issues.
Did you have a question, councillor Panarotto?
Yes, thank you. I had 3 questions. The first one was the last time we got these results, we were able to see the raw data. Is that possible that we can have that after this presentation? The second question is, where does the Māori ward sit in terms of these area differences? So just the screen that we're on at the moment, is it encapsulated in all of the 4 wards similar to the mayor, or how did that process work? And then the third question is, it's kind of similar. Does the satisfaction or otherwise of, say, Dargaville, where there's got some stark contrast to, say, for example, Kaiwaka Mangawhai and Faith and Trust and Leadership, is that reflective of just the councillors in that ward, or could that be, say, participants, surveyees, responses who resides in Dargaville but may be commenting on the Māori ward or the mayor? Thank you.
To answer your first question, yes, the raw data can be provided. To answer your second question, we sampled across the district, and my understanding is that because we'd chosen people randomly off both the general roll and the Māori roll, we'd given everybody who lived within the district an equal chance to participate. So I'm assuming that people who from within the Māori ward have been picked up in the survey. And the third question, I'm not quite sure if I got the gist of that, but this is just the significant differences per area represented here for each of these attributes.
I probably didn't make my question. I'll try and clarify my third question. So, for example, Faith and Trust, which was really low, 37%, as opposed to Otumatea, could those Dargaville respondents have, could the 37% have come from Faith and Trust to do with both the Māori ward and the mayor, like at large, or was it, were they only limited to responses about their own around the Whitehall ward, for example, or was it across wards?
Yeah, the question is asked at the highest level, and then these are the results for people who lived in Dargaville ward. So people who lived in the Dargaville ward, as you can see, were more likely to be dissatisfied with Faith and Trust than those who live in Otumatea.
Okay, so just to clarify, so your last point, they could be happy with their councillors, the Whitehall ward councillors, but be dissatisfied with an Otumatea ward councillor or Kaiwaka Mangawhai ward councillor, which has then brought the results down.
Yeah, we can't draw that conclusion from the survey that we've conducted, as we haven't asked it specifically about the ward council.
I can take the hit, it's all right. I'm more interested to know why we got some blanks there on the page.
Yeah, we've just included the significant differences. So otherwise the chart would be full of stuff and it'd be really hard to read. So anything that's not there falls somewhere in between those numbers.
Yep.
So this is for interest. This is a kind of an interest only slide, this one. So another unique offering that we have for surveys in the local government sector is what we refer to as a reputation profile. So we ask 4 key questions, those that we refer to as the proficiency questions, represented by the x-axis here, which is around core service delivery and financial management. And then what we refer to as a partiality questions, which are around vision and leadership and trust and faith, which is the y-axis there. So essentially what we're doing is we're plotting the entire community in terms of how they perceive their reputation. The Kaikoura District Council will see a good result in the sense that there are now lower numbers that sitting in the skeptics quadrant, but there is still some way to go. So the challenge here is to shift as many people as we can out of the skeptics quadrant, and hopefully into the champions quadrant. It'll flow on from all the other key metrics that you see. So the better that you perform, this profile might be to look as well. So we're able to benchmark.
Indicates a ship that's sort of waterlogged, doesn't it? Below the waterline, we've got a leak.
Be one way of looking at it. So we're able to benchmark the performance of Kaipara. There's 17 councils across New Zealand featured here. We work for more, but they use a different sort of scale measurement system, so they're unable to be included. What we have here is the green line representing best in class. The orange is the worst in class. Silver is the silver or grey is the sector average. And so we see here Kaipara is tracking quite well, either at, just below, or just above the average on these key performance indicators here. So that's a good result. And this is for core service deliverables. So we see a fairly similar sort of story, just water and waste management, perhaps a little bit too far below the sector average, and roading infrastructure we know about. So finally then, just in conclusion, we see nice performance across several of the KPIs, including overall performance. We saw a little bit of decrease in terms of performance around customer experience and service delivered through the consents services processes. We saw nice improvements in perceptions of the roading network. And I illustrated how image and reputation was having a significant impact upon perceptions of overall performance. I also illustrated that the greatest opportunity remains with the performance of the elected members. We see a reputation profile improvement, and we also identified 2 cautionary tales in the data as well, and particularly the one around the polarisation of perceptions is one to be aware of.
Okay, is that further questions? Erin Wilson-Collins.
Thank you. Thank you. You have a very positive outlook in the way that you have dissected that data. Strive for excellence and measure yourself against the best of things that I strive to. So I don't come to the same conclusions, unfortunately. And it's interesting to see that for the second time in a row, I think, we amongst your surveyed councils are the worst waste management. But that's none of my questions. What I was interested to understand is your survey still speaks to our previous ward structure. So is that going to be changing for, I mean, we're a year in now and we've had no data, like the data's skewed because we don't have a Dargab on a West Coast ward. And the Te Maunui ward isn't included in there.
Yeah. The data has been collected per ward, as you can see in there, but it is able to then be recoded if you like.
It hasn't, that's not correct. There's no one.
No, so that's not our ward structure.
Yep.
So we've currently got the Wairoa ward, the Otumatea ward, the Kauaka-Mangawhai ward, and the Te Maunui ward. So this is still based on having a separate Dargaville West Coast Central ward, which hasn't been the case this term. So I don't know if that helps the people filling out their surveys either.
No,
think of who their councillors are.
Yeah.
Have a look at because we've got a wave about to go out, but I'll have a look at last year's as well as this year's. Yeah, sorry, councillor, I actually didn't pick up on that. But yeah, I'll definitely have a look at that.
Thank you. I mean, I noticed it last time, but I forgave it because I figured it was, you've got it, you're keeping up with everything. But by now I would have.
Okay. Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Nair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a few questions when I went through them in detail, but looking at percentages, they're always confusing. If I benchmark our performance to 22, we are down. Benchmark to 23, we are up. So I don't know which way to look at. The questions are, obviously 752 is a good result. Online, I think, is probably the way to go. But the responses, you have also allocated them region-wise. So you said Dargaville, Fields this way. Obviously, you have regionalized those responses, I guess. That's the first question.
There is a question within the questionnaire which asks the respondent which ward they are part of, which ward they reside in.
Yeah. So when you are assimilating the people are very dissatisfied in Dargaville, is it more to do with the number of respondents from Dargaville? Or is it the whole 752 percentile taken on?
So what we do is we set out to invite the representative number of Dargaville respondents as a proportion of the total Kaipara district population. So that's what we set out to do through the sampling, through the electoral roll sample frame. We don't often get there, but we get enough. We've got more than enough in each of the wards to be then able to provide the weightings to lift them up to where they should be in terms of what the census told us the proportion of Dargaville residents were of the entire Kaipara district. So that process all happens. And so by the time we get to the weighted data, it's a highly accurate representation across the entire district.
The second question is obviously, I've got three questions. Okay, cool. The second question is, we have ignored I've read the comments as well. So some people have actually made it very specific. For example, consuls, they were asked to provide resource consent when they already had one, things like that, which actually depicts more than in terms of services. But so they are not weighted in those results. When you look at the comments of the people, someone is saying the mayor is the best, and someone is talking about the worst one. All those comments, which are very descriptive, and it will be good to look at the raw data because that will tell a better story than stats. The second question is, so many people don't respond to a certain question. There are 15 questions. I may choose not to respond to 3 of them. So how do you provide for that in terms of percentage? Do you exclude those people from the numbers?
No. So everybody's responses are counted. You'll see as you go through that the sample size will sometimes fluctuate.
Okay.
So you're right. So some people will say don't know, or not applicable, and that is a legitimate answer. But that is then taken out of the analysis that we will then do with that particular question.
The third and the last one is on looking at the numbers. The people who are very dissatisfied in the whole pie chart was 30%, 32%. But in comparison, you chose to have satisfied people, but not very satisfied. The number of very satisfied people is generally very low. So in some of the sample, you have not had that category. So does it actually polarize the weighting or whatever you do? I don't know.
No, I'm not quite sure if I'm following the question, but what we look to do is, because we are measuring this across the 17 councils in the benchmarking report, across that 10-point scale, we're choosing what are we going to report here as the satisfaction metric that is going to stay consistent across each of those councils. Some councils will choose to take 7 to 10, and other councils will choose to take 6 to 10. And so that's kind of an arbitrary decision on where we're going to draw the line here in terms of measuring satisfaction. The most important point there is that it remains consistent year on year. And so we're able to say, yes, we're going to.
The weighting part, you have even weighted the genders, male and female.
Yeah.
Thinking what kind of weighting you are using?
Not a lot. So that's it's a generally 50-50 call, and we'll get 48-52. And so they're weighted slightly up in order to get it to 50-50.
Okay.
Councillor Williams, you have a question?
I do. It's for the staff, I think. We have actually been sent out the wave 3 raw, is that the raw data with all the verbatims? And yeah. So that feeds.
So, I was actually gonna make that point, thank you. The verbatim, I believe you have the verbatim file.
Councillor Vincent.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, very diplomatic. In your summary page, you've got the statement, the greatest opportunity remains with the performance of elected members. You also highlight the caution, which is quite valid, polarisation of perceptions across the community. What's the connection between those two?
So, let's go up and have a look at it. So it should be reasonably clear from that top chart. That's the
Polarisation.
Yeah, sorry, I'm commenting on, empirically what we can see through the data. It's not, I won't step outside and make comments outside of that.
So you're not going to say whether or not there's a relationship between that, what you see, and also the, well, I'll put it bluntly, the underperformance of elected members.
I can't comment on whether it's underperformed.
I think it's important to understand this is a community's perception, so you're only reporting what the perception is of those that have been surveyed. So,
Then put it another way, if we were to work towards reversing the polarisation of perceptions across the community, we think that would lead to perceptions of improvement of performance of elected members.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. That's the point we're making here. And I actually said, you might think it's good that you've got 23% scoring you 8 to 10, but you're leaving behind 31% are sitting down at 1 to 3. That's the point.
So if we were a more inclusive council, we might have a different perception. You don't need to comment on that.
Supposition.
Can I ask a question? It's a little bit left field. So, CE Maris tells me we do these quarterly, is that correct? Just so that in your work with other councils, do you ask exactly the same questions? That's why you can have a comparison, obviously, in your reporting. Is there an opportunity for the council to dive in a little bit deeper to ask people what they see as a need? For example, we've just had Luxon, our Prime Minister, basically lambast the councils at LG and Z, which excludes Canterbury, Auckland and a number of others, but he basically said stick to your knitting and stop the fantasy stuff. But I wonder the thing that really intrigues me is what the actual ratepayers really want. You know, I mean, on one hand, you've got them saying, well, we don't want to pay too much rates. And on the other hand, you've got plenty of them that say, we still want a swimming pool and we still want this and we still want the other. You know, how do you get, what I'd like to really know is if it's possible through a survey to gauge whether people really want to stick, the majority of them really want you to stick to hardcore services or not. You know, do you ever get to ask that question through your survey?
Yeah, it typically wouldn't end any sort of survey, but we've done loads of work in that respect.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, if I could just leap in there. So they're the sort of questions that you could try and ask an independent survey, created by council if you wanted to find out that stuff. It is a little bit tied to consultation and an annual plan or LTP as well, right? So you could find that information out during the LTP cycle or an annual plan cycle if we're consulting. And there is an opportunity in that space to do so, but it would need to be tied into that whole work program, for example.
Yeah.
And I think what we look for is activity managers in the verbatims, which sometimes, most of the time, can be quite hard to read. Is, I guess, things that jump out where we can, which do actually affect the services that we provide, and where we can make changes. So we do actively look at that items.
Okay.
And sorry, if I could just say one more thing, don't forget that a lot of these survey results form the measures for the annual report. And so, in the annual report, you'll set measures as part of the LTP cycle, and these measures are measured by the respondents' results, and then they inform the annual report, which you'll be looking at and signing off in the next couple of months.
Councillor Howard, followed by Councillor Vincent.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Michael, just going back to your last, I think, summary chart and the water management. And I don't know whether you're able to answer this, whether we ask council to answer it, but you know, a 25% factor on water management. Now, is this, you know, drinking water? Is this wastewater? What is it that's driving it? I mean, I think that it's a question that council needs to know. And so therefore, is it from a specific area?
Yeah, and all of those answers are in the report, and I must apologise because off the top of my head I can't remember every single thing.
Yeah,
that's in there. But that driver analysis that I highlighted earlier, that will be showing what is driving that number.
Well, I was just having a look at that, you know, the details, and it didn't seem all that clear. But however, I'll have another look. It's certainly something we need to, you know, be on top of.
Through the chair, also the dashboards and verbatims that are sent out after each wave, they do actually, it does, the dashboards actually show very clearly the results that we've come to them.
Right, thanks for you, Nadine and Michael. I think we'll move on now. One more question, sorry.
So people ask me, this will be published on our website, it's a survey? It usually is, isn't it? Yep, that's cool.
Good one.
Direction to this.
Thank you very much. That's really cool, and we thank you for that.
Thank you.
Look forward to the next one.
Yep. Roof, go through the roof.
Next on our list is down a transportation update. 224, we've got Chris Edsel here, is he? And Dion Van Ruin.
We'll just give Alana a couple of, we're all online.
They're all online.
Yeah.
Okay, oh, that's right.
It's online.
Voting, what we are not doing, voting.
If you could listen to for a second, Council now, but they're all online. We're just getting them and
You know,
They're all,
lined up.
they're online to talk about the roads, but they didn't want to drive.
Well, we've driven them today. We've driven them.
They're maintaining the road, that's right.
Yes. Over you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may just take the opportunity just to brief council on a couple of issues that have taken place over the last couple of days. So we have now received our final funding for the next 3 years. You will recall we did put an allocation within the LTP. In June, we received our indicative funding, and as of yesterday, we've now received our final funding. So we're just busy analysing all the data, Mr. Mayor, from the LTP, the indicative funding, and our final funding. And my intention is to provide a summary report at the October briefing outlining all the changes. So look, I will hand over to Chris now, and we'll take you through the report, and we can take questions as we go.
Chris.
Yep.
Thank you, Chris.
I think Dion's going to run through the report, okay. And then I'll do a couple of the slides as well. So I'll leave it with you to start there, Dion.
Yep. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. It's been another exciting and busy month 2. And just on our executive summary, if you can go to the first slide. I unfortunately don't have control here. Can someone just go to the first slide?
One
Second
moment.
slide.
One moment.
Don't worry, Alana can do anything. She'll get it. There you go.
Thank you. Right, as I said, good afternoon all. It's been another busy and exciting month. We'd like to use this opportunity as well just to say a big thank you to KDC for arranging the welcoming ceremony on the 12th of August, which was greatly appreciated by all. We've also happy to announce that we've secured our second office, which will be our main office in Dargaville, and we're currently moving into the premises as we're speaking. We've employed 5 more local staff, totaling number now 17 local staff members. To date, we have 3 grading crews out in the network, as well as our patrol trucks across the network, as well as engaging the local pre-approved subcontractors, and they're increasing, the usage of them is increasing as the months go by. The network assessment is basically completed, We're in the process of analyzing the all faults data, developing maintenance intervention strategies, and our asset management team is working on an optimized program going forward. We're obviously going to be doing this in collaboration with KDC. That will be in alignment with the budget and working as well with NZTA where needed. There's still a significant amount of work to do as we work through the different challenges we face as a team to improve the KDC network. Will take us on to the next slide. So currently our integrated structure looks like this. On the 19th of August, we held our first integrated collaborative workshop in Mangawhai, which was really welcomed by all, and we're looking forward to taking this further forward and working together as one team. Next slide, please. All right, going forward, we'll be producing a lot more health and safety stats, but just on a high level, during the month, we inducted 5 new staff members. We did health and safety inductions to 2 new subcontractors, or the pre-approved ones, Shane Cullen and Huband. We did first aid training, was carried out for all our staff. We carried out competency assessments on all our drivers and operators. We had one near miss this month, the tipper unit getting stuck in a water table during wet conditions. We had a couple of emergency call-outs which we responded to, including the house transporter on the Mangawhai Road that lost its load, as can be seen in the photograph here. We had 4 health and safety audits carried out by KDC, of which 3 was passed and 1 needed basically a fail, needed attention, which we have dealt with already. Yep, and that's a wrap up with health and safety. If we can go on to the next slide, please. Right, customer requests. Since the 1st of July, we've received over 317 requests for services. We've managed to close out 206 at the end, at the time of writing, since the 1st of July. Most requests for services are, as stated earlier before, is unsealed and drainage related. We've had between some very good feedback. We've also obviously had some negative feedback with some, of the unsealed roads, which we're working through. We've reached out to customers, met customers on the road, and that will be ongoing.
Not a question.
Next slide.
I've got a question here from Councillor Nair.
Okay, Dion, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
First of all, I'd like to know where the Mangototo office is, because I tried to find, I couldn't. So if you can email where they're located.
No problem.
The question, thank you. And the question is, obviously you took inheritance of many faults. You mentioned 2,821 faults, and 757 of them required intervention. So I'm just trying to figure out, what does it mean to elected members? Is it like a crisis mode, or what kind of intervention?
So I'm not sure if I got the question correctly.
Also, there is a comprehensive work program, October 24, 2,821 faults you inherited from Venthia. This is on, you have mentioned it on page network assessment and asset, the previous slide we were just talking about.
If we can go back to the
19th of August, second para. Inspectors have inspected 1,570 kilometers of the network.
Oh, no, we haven't got to that slide yet.
Well, it's before this slide. Anyway, that's my question. Whenever you come to
we will get on to that one straight away.
The details of the fort, so we can put our head around.
Yes.
Yeah, I can answer that. So I'll just answer that for you now. So I guess what we've done is the network assessments identified 2,800 faults out there. They're in those 2,800 faults comprise of a whole lot of priorities and severities. So that includes both the low priority and the high priority ones. We're just running those faults now through some modelling exercises to work out where the high cost sections are. But I guess to answer your question as far as, is it a crisis? No, it's not a crisis. It's more, how do we prioritise the sites that are high priority now against the funding that we have? So over the next, I guess, 4 weeks, we'll get a better view of whether that funding is enough to I guess, address the challenges that we have on the network. But at this stage, it's not a crisis. It's probably more of challenges.
Okay, thank you.
You're on mute, Dion.
Yeah, this take us basically through to this slide, and as Chris has summarized it up very nicely. Thanks, Chris. So we could actually I'd like to add on to that, obviously, with once we do that whole assessment of the all faults data, obviously we're going to be working together, with KDC and with the budget and the likes with NZTA to make sure that we get the best fit, what the actual network requirements are. All right, we can go on to the next slide, please. Sealed maintenance activities. So our key challenges we're still facing is obviously 40% of the reseal sites from last year were deferred to this year. These deferred sites require extensive pre-seals. Due to time and budget constraints, we may need to defer this year's reseal sites as well. The work undertaken, we've started scoping and marking out these pre-seal requirements needed for these deferred sites from last year, and we're quantifying them. We also did some temporary widening at the Paparoa Oakley slip. And in the interim, we had a collaborative program meeting as well with KDC on the 20th of August. So motions are in place just to get us going on that ForwardWorks program. We also assessed various drainage issues around Dargaville. The next slide, please, takes us to unsealed roads. So as stated before, we've got 3 full-time grading crews out on the network. We're busy dealing with the high number of requests for services. Key challenges, sections of roads with historical use of page green and wet weather has been a challenge. Concentrated sections of potholing due to the lack of crossfall and shape. The lack of good aggregates on some of the sections of road as well, and poor drainage and high shoulders. So key works undertaken during the month, since the first 173 kilometers of road was graded, and we imported over 1,500 cubes of metal over sections. We have had to deal with customer complaints. We've also received some very good customer feedback. We've met with some of the customers on Amana Road example, Angus. We've also sourced a good metal supply source in the north from Aaron Pascoe. So we're pretty confident. We're pushing forward and getting these problems sorted out one by one. Taking us to the next slide, please, to drainage activities. As mentioned before, drainage is super critical to the maintenance and resilience of both the sealed and unsealed network. It appears that in general, the general drainage maintenance, such as high shoulder removal, culvert inlet and outlet clearing, cutouts and scour protection has been neglected for some time on the network. We've identified some urgent key areas needing drainage maintenance, and we have received the go-ahead to carry these out now, and those include James Road, Atkins Road, Barrier View Road, Baldock Road, Devick, George Road, Mountain Road, Kelly's Bay Road, and Bayview Road. And we've also attended to some other drainage works during the month, and those were on Swamp Road, Hilltop, Ford, and Amana Road.
Just a question,
Councillor Nair, you have a question?
Sorry, Dion. Just on drainage maintenance, you did mention the drainage in Dargaville area is very bad. And you have listed these roads. I don't see any familiar road here.
No. Yeah, no,
so
we did.
is it
We
not-
did.
Sorry?
Yeah, just to answer you, sorry. So the ones in Dargaville, that was following a request, a specific request of certain south of the bridge, and we did respond. We just did some in various inspections on those roads on the south of the bridge in Dargaville.
Yeah. So no, my question is, are you still? You mentioned that we carried. We are waiting for approval. I mean, you got approval for these roads. Are you waiting for approvals for drainage in Dargaville area? Because I don't
No,
see.
those were just assessments. We were requested to go and look at those roads. So no, there's nothing significant planned there yet.
Why?
Well, yeah, that's obviously pending budget and forward works program. So that will come out in the actual the all faults data, and when we put this program together, it will come. That will obviously be jointly decided with the team as to which areas we're going to be addressing. But those are not high priority at this stage.
Oh, my concern is at some point you have to look at because drainage and I see that you have to give some focus. I know you have a new office in Dargaville, but you have to come out with a plan of those roads which are needing drainage there.
So through you,
Yeah,
Mr.
sure,
Mayor,
sure.
what I would say, Dion, is, you're currently going through a road by road program analysis. So over the first 3 months of the contract, and the idea being at the end of that 3-month period, we'll have a really good picture of the program of work moving forward for that contract. Now, it's kind of linked to the point that Anand said at the start of this item. We will only have limited budget. And so given that constraint, there will need to be a priority put to the work needed. And
That's
so
correct.
we still need to do that work collectively over this 3-month period to identify that program of work, prioritize it, assess it against the budget available, and then we'll be reporting that back to you. So I suppose that's the high level point.
I understand that's what I'm trying to say. The all roads are not in Dargaville. So all these prioritized roads, none of them is in West. I don't understand. That's what I'm trying to focus on. If you have a pool of money, you should allocate it wisely. It's not just that.
Allocated according to priority, and we're still doing that work.
Priorities all in
Yes,
one
we're
way.
still
That's
doing
what
this.
I'm trying to
These
tell.
were just initial some urgent sites that were identified.
I'll just on that note, I just see you've got key works here that you have done. You've done 173 kilometres of graded road.
Yeah.
And Ash, I can say I've had a lot of phone calls from out Kitty's Bay Way, Potu, and I see a lot of these roads are in here. So there's been work occurring on some of these networks. It's not as if there hasn't been anything happening out there.
Okay. Well, I can't see it in this report.
I put a dis-
Go to page 45.
Okay.
There's quite a lot in there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
To me, can I just ask a question? Okay, thank you. Just while we have the photo there showing the culvert that's been cleaned out, I have an association with our Kaipara Harbour and wanting to see the quality of the water going into it as good as possible. If you were to look at taking extra scoop out with the bucket on the high side of the culvert, say for 2 bucket widths, you'd have a mini silt detention facility. If you did that at each culvert, there would be the opportunity to reduce the amount of silt getting into the harbour, because I think as the council's roading network may well be a significant contributor to the silt going into the harbour.
No, thanks for that. We'll
And if
take that
there's
point. Yeah.
very little extra cost involved in doing that, it implies that someone will be going back with the bucket in a relatively short time frame to clean that out again, but it would be a contribution at little extra cost, dare I suggest.
Yes, that's definitely. Thanks for that. We will definitely make a point of that.
But I am emotional about this. I really love the work you're doing. I got stopped on the Ford Road this morning because by the stop go man. I just about got out and gave him a hug. because there's a dropout on the road that's been like that for years. And now it's been fixed, and there's been some road table drains fixed at the same time for on either side of it. So like you have grasped the fundamentals of the need to get water off the road to protect the integrity of the road formation.
Yeah.
And I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well said.
Right, could we go to the next slide, please? Renewals. Chris, would you like to give us an update on our renewals?
Yep, I will do. Thank you. So I guess where we're at the moment with the renewals activities. So currently marking out pre-reseal repairs on this year's reseal program. So we've got 21 Ks specifically that were deferred from previous years that have been brought forward into 24-25. So that's our key priority at the moment, is working on those sites. Both Mitchell and Rob from KDC, they've both been out there together, marking out the repairs that are needed before the reseals can go ahead. So at this stage, now that we've got that, I guess, budget confirmed, now allows us to really look at how many kilometres of reseal we can do this season. We've identified approximately $600,000 to $700,000 worth of pre-reseal repairs that need to happen on that first 21K site. So that really will take up probably a good 2/3 of the reseal budget for this year. So we'll be looking to really just prioritise those remaining sites for this year. So that's where the reseals are at. Resealing at this stage, program to begin post-Christmas. So we'll get all the pre-reseal repairs done, get all the sites clean, ready to go, and then the reseal teams will come in and begin that exercise post-Christmas. Rehabilitation sites a little bit more complex. You'll see the 6 odd sites listed there, Moore Street through to Quail Way. The high priorities for us are Moore Street and Whakapirau Road. So Moore Street, as you will be aware, in Mangawhai, they're seriously deteriorated. So we're just reviewing the design for that at the moment, and with a view to reduce that design down considerably from what it was previously. But that's high priority for this year. Whakapirau, finishing that project. That's a project that was halfway completed prior to the change. So that's the next urgent one. And then depending on budget, I guess Mangawhai, Bald Rock, and actually Potu Road, which isn't on that list, but Potu Road has deteriorated significantly over the winter period. So I don't think it'll get through another winter. So we'll probably look to try to prioritise that road as well. Yeah, so that design and testing, initial design is sitting back with a couple of the key people from KDC at the moment. They're working through that, and we'll look to give a better update now that we've got those budgets confirmed.
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's Mark Vincent here again, if you can't see me. I live at Whakapirau, so I'm interested in the Whakapirau Road and wanting to be able to have some good news to tell the people as I've been updating them over the previous 6 months or more. So I really like to see that word urgent there. That's great, because it's a bit of an embarrassment for me because there's been some unfulfilled promises in the past, just saying. We were promised some temporary patches to get us through the winter. Well, now we're into spring. So hopefully it's not a temporary patch to get us through to next winter. And because it's in a pretty sad way. So I really appreciate you attending to that. There were it was going to be done before the last financial year, but they discovered a problem with low hanging overhead power lines, which you might have a solution for by using different sort of trucks. I'm not sure what the issue is there. So,
that issue.
Give me a bit of a keep us updated as to timelines. That would be great because I can share them with the local community.
Yep, no, certainly will. And look, that road will get done this year. It's really high priority for us because obviously been in that state for a while now. The issue is by lifting that road up now, it actually reduces the height to the power lines below 4.2 meters, which makes it, I guess, illegal. So we're just trying to find a solution to that at the moment. But we will get that road done this year. That's it's high priority.
So it's not the actual like the construction process with trucks on hoists going past. It's more actually just.
Yeah, it's more because we're raising the design was to raise the road up by a certain amount. I don't know how much, but that's now caused the distance between the top of the seal and the power lines to be below 4.2 meters. So that's the I think the solution there perhaps is to shift the power lines, but that's not in. I don't know about that yet.
Just put another pole in maybe. Yep. Okay.
Thanks, Chris. Councillor Howard would like to have a word.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chris, thank you. Look, just coming back to your reseals. We had an issue last year where a number of streets in Mangawhai and I think in other areas also were resealed, and we asked, well, residents became enraged because they were sort of saying, we don't, the street doesn't need resealed. There are others that need it. And we were told at the time that, well, that was on the plan. There's no flexibility and you just have to go ahead and do that. And also that it's part of a long-term maintenance plan. And that's cool. I mean, I think that's good that there is that long-term aspect. But with your reseals now, are you guys applying an element of flexibility so that, I know that there's a prioritisation gone through, but where you have the opportunity, are you going to put in a road that has, in a short period of time, gone backwards? I know that there's some that we highlighted over in Dargaville last month. Are you going to apply flexibility where our previous people wouldn't?
Yep, 100%. And I guess
Fantastic.
that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing now through the network assessment, is really looking at the high cost sections. So there's a whole lot of, I guess, criteria that goes into deciding which road we do and when. Some of those projects will be holding treatments to even, generally you reseal for about 15 to 16 years as a lifespan. But some of them we may only get 3 or 4 years out of, depending on the state underneath. So it's all about weighing up best bang for buck. So 100% will be flexible. And my approach really is we reseal it before it reaches failure. So you want to keep good roads good, I guess, and that'll be our approach. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to add on to that. We've actually scoped some of the reseal sites, that are up for this year, or the ones that were deferred from last year. And one particular road in Mangawhai was actually in a good nick. So there's a big portion of that doesn't actually need reseal for now. And that is a cost saving, and we'd rather use that money elsewhere where it's needed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Dion and Chris, first of all, I must thank you, as other people have done, in terms of residents' comments, more blue than brown on the roads, in terms of asphalt. The quality is good. But in terms of saying, when you have your Dargaville office set up, there's a lot of money, as you know, is already allocated, and Aneen can vouch for that, for flood work and a lot of repairs and stopping and whatnot, little things, a river road. So I would like you, it's not just because I'm from Dargaville, it's just that the flood has happened 2 years ago, to give some priority to those works. That'll be awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Definitely. Yep.
Thank you. Yes, we'll do. Well, I think that takes us on through to our last slide. It's just the expenditure to date. Yeah, so we've just prepared a cash envelope there with a upper and a lower limit. And our first month's expenditure to date was $741,000. Obviously, as the budget's confirmed and the Forward Works program, we will be able to have a much more accurate forecast for the year ahead.
Yeah, and I think what we're looking to do going forward, right, is having budget graphs for each of the activity budgets within the funding. So you'll see a budget, there'll be a graph there for sealed pavement maintenance, a graph for unsealed, a graph for drainage, to show you what the level of funding is and how we're progressing against that funding on a month-by-month basis. So you'll be able to see that the money's then spread across different activities in different areas of the network.
Right.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Thanks all. That concludes our month-end report. Thanks to all.
Thank you very much for keeping us up to date with that, people. That's appreciated.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda is
Thanks, Tim.
item non-legislative delegations, Shireen Mundy, Jessie Allison. And Jessie's online, is she? And Shireen's here, is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
We'll
welcome.
just seeing if she might.
We just.
Oh, man, we've got one road goes around. Yeah, straight down there.
5 attachments on it. Good. You can go to see.
Kia ora tātou. Jessie Allison is also joining us online to talk to any technical questions around some of the financial delegations. I ask her to chime in. Right. So this brings us nearly to the conclusion of the delegations review project. This is the last item I will be presenting to a briefing to council on this matter, hopefully. And it focuses on the non-legislative delegations and the council to committee and elected member delegations. So the non-legislative delegations are not the very, very long list that we work through under legislation, but these are operational, administrative, managerial delegations that council staff need to do to support implementing the business of the decisions that council makes through the annual plan, long-term plan processes, and all other decisions that you make along the way on a monthly basis. So there's four categories: property delegations, financial management delegations, legal and administrative, and contract and procurement delegations. Then in addition to those non-legislative delegations, we have council to committee and elected member delegations. Now, in a perfect world, council's terms of reference that are adopted at the beginning of each training would 100% cover all of the delegations required for each of those committees to function as the mayor and council intends for that term. Sometimes there's a little bit of a gap, and so sometimes council adopts additional delegations to, say, a committee or individual elected members to accommodate certain circumstances. We have very few of these delegations, but the ones that we do have are quite important, so we'll talk those through when we get to it. So luckily there's not that many in that one. So the outcome of the review was that some delegations were not required. In general terms, Simpson Grierson, who kindly provides advice to staff through Taitura webinars, provided a very detailed webinar on delegations, and confirmed my thinking that a delegation is something where there is discretion on the person making the decision. There's discretion. They can choose blue or red or green or yellow or purple. In many instances, some of our existing delegations are functional. If X happens, then Y has to happen. If council, say, adopts, an example would be if council makes a new bylaw, council is required to publish a public notice saying that it is made a bylaw. There is no discretion on the staff member's half who puts the public notice in the paper. It has to happen. There is no delegation required to the staff member who's dealing with that issue to, and usually in my case, to publish the public notice. So that gives you an example of where there is. So there were quite a few delegations where there is no discretion, so they are not required. Also, some have been superseded, and in other cases, they've been rewritten to provide more clarity. So I've worked quite closely with the SMEs, and Jesse's been hugely helpful in the financial space in terms of working out how the finance team staff administer your direction and your decisions in terms of paying for contracts, paying for all sorts of things, and managing finances in association with the decisions made under the Treasury policies, for example. So there's no significant changes, but quite a lot of tidy up. So this is not a new build. This is a renovation. It's a nice tidy renovation, and allows staff more certainty in terms of their roles and their functions moving forward. So, whoopsie. Next slide. And that is it in summary. I will say, sorry, there's obviously one slide that I thought was in there that's not in the slide deck. One of the issues was when we're doing this kind of work, it's very important to make sure that we get our ducks in a row in terms of how all of one piece of work lines up with other pieces of work of council. And in terms of the procurement and contract delegations, what I found was that there's a discrepancy between the delegated financial authorities and some previous delegations that were made in relation to the procurement policy and the current procurement policy. So there's three different areas that are slightly misaligned. Now, the item explains this to you more in detail, but it is a case of the delegations, the DFAs were reviewed in 2019, but then have been subsequently reviewed by council. And then in 2021 or 22, council adopted a procurement policy. And unfortunately, at that time, there wasn't an alignment with the DFAs undertaken to understand how the new policy, which was very new to council at that point in time, then spoke to the existing delegations. So to put it bluntly, it's a bit of a mess. So what we're proposing as part of this is that to simplify the whole process, council has now got a really solid procurement policy that council has adopted that is very prescriptive in terms of how staff have to act. And staff have to act in accordance with the policy to undertake any procurement. And if they don't, they need authorisation and they need to go through certain processes to do that. And council is well aware of these as you approve procurement plans for larger value items over time. So what we're proposing is to amend the procurement policy to remove that misalignment and to have a very simple alignment in terms of the procurement policy approvals that align to staff's delegated financial authorities. So the key discrepancy in that area is that and it was explained to me by the staff member who used to be responsible for the procurement policy, is no longer with us, that they acknowledged it was an error on their behalf, that they didn't deal with it at the time. And what happens is council approved delegated financial authority to the CE of $1 million quite a few years ago. And that's been the case since, I believe, 2021 off the top of my head, 2022. However, the procurement plan approval is set at $500,000 for council to approve procurement plans over $500,000. So that's a discrepancy that anything that the CE approves over $500,000 will be a contract. It will be a procurement plan. It can't be, the CE can't approve anything for that much money unless it's a transfer of rates to NRC, which the CE's got a separate delegation for. So that's just managing money. But in terms of purchasing things on behalf of council, the CE is bound to follow the procurement policy and to approve a procurement plan as part of that. So this proposal is to very much simplify things and have a procurement plan approval process is aligned with your delegation. So if you have a delegated financial authority of $50,000 as a staff member, as a tier 3 staff member, you can approve a procurement plan for $50,000 and so on and so forth in alignment with the delegated financial authorities that council's recently reapproved. And I feel like I've been listening to my voice for quite a while. Hope that's explained it, and I'm happy to take any questions.
No questions? Thank you. So been very clear that it was. Thank you for updating us.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
Okay. Next on our item is Kaipara District Council Organisation Transition Program Update, September 2024. And we welcome Sarah Morris to present this in person.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
All right. So this is our regular update on the after organisation review, and as last month, it is in two parts. I want to endeavour to go the right way on the slides today. There we go. All right. So this first slide is about the KDC org review for the substantive organisation. So this is not the roading team. So you'll see at the top there the activities we've undertaken in the month prior, so in August. Busy time, we've done one secondary review of one particular team, and we have literally just completed the secondary review of the planning and development team, which is actually under next steps. I'll probably start with the GM's service delivery recruitment because it's probably the one that's of most interest to most of you, given it impacts the executive team and obviously your chief executive. So we have run now two processes. One was a KDC run process where we didn't find a suitable candidate to take forward to testing and offering stage. The secondary process was a search process, which we utilised an external consultant to help us with. That was much more successful. We had a very good, strong long list, and we had a strong short list. We did offer someone on the short list and they declined. So we have decided to go back and have another look at that shortlist, and we've also had a couple of referrals, plus a couple of other people pop out of the woodwork since then. So we've actually got a few options. So there's absolutely no need to panic at all. Because the process will take time, the chief executive and I have discussed getting a short-term, fixed-term person in to allow us the proper time to recruit well to this role. So we are interviewing a couple of candidates tomorrow who potentially could start straight away and just hold the ship steady for us while we complete the recruitment phase. So that's in hand, and we've got a couple of options. We are doing, the P&C team rather, are doing some workplace behaviours assessments for certain teams. That's just to help them gel in their new teams and perhaps just, correct some behaviour or realign some behaviour. And we are working our way through the JD reviews. For this month in September, the decisions that the Chief Executive will make from the reviews of the monitoring and compliance and planning and development teams will come into play, and there'll be a change process around that. We are continuing to do the individual position descriptions that we identified needed some work. We do have an all-staff session that we are setting up for November to conclude the change process and get everybody into that really sort of positive mindset and moving forward with their work. And there are a couple of other activities that do link into the change program, but are more cleanly linked to the Chief Executive KPIs, so they'll be reported separately, but it does look at things like productivity, culture and reporting. Any questions from any of you on the KDC slide? Gone.
Must be some questions. No? Okay, thank you.
I'll keep going. There's another slide though. We'll do the roading one. That could bring some questions. All right. So the roading changes, we are nearly closed out from the NTA processes and systems. So there's a couple more weeks work there. They should be concluded by the end of September. For example, all of our KDC employed staff are using their KDC emails and IT equipment and apps. So they are definitely less NTA and more KDC. We have begun some workshops with the Downer team. That includes Chris, who spoke to you before, and the integrated delivery team. They've been really successful. So just everybody getting to know each other and understand what they do and working together as a cohesive group And there's a few more of those to be set up, and Chris Edsel, who also spoke to you before, and myself will be putting those in the diary very shortly. And basic culture change activities going on. That's as we build that integrated team and bring the roading people into the KDC hen house. Any questions on the roading? Oh, shall I give you, I'll give you an update on the vacancies because that'll be of interest. So we had a few vacancies, about 4 or 5 in that roading structure that you'll have seen go. We have got our finance and reporting analyst starting next week, so that's a good step. That sort of holds steady our financial management in that space. We have a contracted roading manager for the moment while we recruit for that role. We have interviewed for that role and have not found anyone today, but we are continuing to look. We've interviewed for capital project managers. So this project manager sits outside that roading integrated team and works on our capital projects. And they were good interviews, so we may be able to recruit successfully from that round. And we're currently just beginning recruitment for the asset manager position. So we're all trucking along quite nicely in the recruitment space.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you. Just the, sorry, Anand, how long is he going to be with us?
Yes. So Anand, as you know, is seconded to us from Watercare. Yep. He is going to be with us in his current capacity until the end of September. So it's not a huge amount of time. However, because of his waters background and potential work that we might have in that local water space, he may not necessarily be completely lost to us, but he will not have the capacity to do that service delivery general manager role the way he has.
I'll just add to that, I am meeting with Watercare with Anand before the end of the week, and there may well be a bit of a transition period, so a reduction in time.
I guess I'd like to make sure I get to see him to wish him well, that's all.
I'll make sure that happens, that's fine.
I'd like to make sure you keep him in somewhere.
So I have a contract through till Christmas, so you will continue to see me, particularly at the briefings, when I give you this update and around the tracks.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any further questions? Thank you for that update.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, meeting closed.
Mr. Mayor? What the place?
Yep.